Hey, good evening, everyone. Another Tuesday evening. Hope everybody is well and doing what they need to do. Just wait. My sound engineer was on it today. Just let me know that YouTube is up and running. I've got to, yes, certainly say welcome. I want to apologise to anybody who tried to get on Facebook. I just couldn't access anything at all on Facebook. So they really have blocked me good and proper. So I do apologise for that, but I will continue with LinkedIn. Now, if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, you can interact with me. You can send. I think I can't send back on YouTube on LinkedIn, but verbally I can respond to a question if you have one. But we're looking at moral injury. Is recovery possible? But also, I asked the question today: are you secretly dealing with emotional and psychological pain that's been caused by your employers or your work colleagues? That does happen. So thank you very much indeed, sound engineer. Good evening, Sonia, and I'm just going to send the first bit of the moral injury. What moral injury is? There's two bits of it. Here we go. So moral injury, basically, it's a violation of values of equality and justice, things that you see, you witness. Maybe sometimes you should have done something you didn't, and there's a whole kind of clash of values. I'm more interested in moral injury in the workplace, i.e. bullying, email bullying, where people have been victimized and so forth, where you've gone in and your values is to give of your best to a company and you've been singled out, you've been loyal, you're loyal, you see something that's wrong, you call it out, and then you're then victimized by your actions. So that's kind of moral injury, but it can come through bullying, gaslighting, a whole range of stuff. So my name is Delroy Hall. I'm a trained psychotherapist, counselor, teacher, trainer. And you may say, what is the difference between psychotherapy and counseling? It's called elitism. That's all I can say on that one. So welcome anyone who's watching this evening. And if you're watching later on catch up during the week, also just to say thank you for taking the time to spend with me. I'm hoping that it's going to be helpful for you. It's interesting that people who've contacted me, not everybody of course, but some people have contacted me and said they were experiencing certain things at work. They didn't have a language for it, but watching the live broadcast, it gave them a language to understand what was going on with them at the workplace. And it's a horrible, it really is, if you experience it, it is a horrible situation. So we're going to be looking at ways of recovery, but I'm going to be focusing on one thing in particular today. So just to recap, last week I kind of spent a lot of time on one of the ways, of course, is self-compassion, an idea taken from the kind of Buddhist contemplative tradition. Had three components: mindfulness, which is very kind of popular now, and common humanity. Common humanity is where there's things that unite us together. We're different in terms of gender, skin color, ethnicity, but everyone at some level suffers, and everyone is in search of peace. So, and I said before, I've said it quite a few times, that in all the years I've been a therapist, nobody's ever come to me and said, Delroy, I really want peace. They're suffering, that's why they've come. And they've never said, sometimes they say I'm suffering, but they've never said I want peace. But that's really what they want. They want peace to be free from the suffering. And that's something that unites us all as human beings. At one level, we're suffering, and the other thing that we are searching for peace. And if we understood that concept, and I'm not an idealist as such, but understanding that is in everybody would, and if we understood that, would go a great way in helping us to relate to one another. So one of the things I've really said is that moral injury, and certainly people who I've worked with, even on a personal level, who've experienced it, it's as though moral injury catapults them in an alien world where everything that was familiar is now unfamiliar. What was certain is now uncertain. The future quite often seems bleak, and in some place, is it worth going on? Jonathan Shea, the psychiatrist who termed the phrase moral injury from the returnees from Vietnam War, he said it was that led soldiers to take their own lives. And even now, not the PTSD or the horrors or the loss of their experience with their mates and so forth. He said they were able to kind of deal with that, but the PTSD, but the moral injury, i.e. killing mothers, children and so forth, which they didn't sign up for, was the thing that had a massive effect on them. And reading the accounts of some soldiers going in and decimating families and asking the question, what is the American government doing so far away, getting us to do these things under order? So that's the whole thing around moral injury. So, oh, hang on, somebody said, all right, okay, LinkedIn news, I don't know who. Someone said this week has been alien. If you want to say a bit more about that, please do. I think I used to know who LinkedIn user is, but I'm not too sure if it's the same person. So it catapults you into this kind of world. It's strange, and I wrote in the article that it's as though, and you might search for something familiar, and it's not there. And if you do find something familiar, it's as though I spoke about it being in a recycle bin, and you get it from the recycle bin, but you can't edit it now. It's read only. And sometimes the values which we held dear, all of that has been blown out of the water, and now we can't recover them. Or if we do, we can't go back to normal. I think I read somebody's got this book called about pursuing normal, and that's what happens when there's a catastrophe in our lives. We want normal again. We're pursuing normality. So what we do, what workplaces do, somebody's had this major experience, and what workplaces do, they pass people off to the employee assistance program for 6 sessions of counseling. And let me just say right now, at the moment, there is no agreed treatment path of dealing with people who've experienced moral injury. So you've got somebody who is a counselor, and I've worked as an employee assistance program, so it's not as if I'm kind of standing on one side of the fence and throwing stones. I've worked as a employee assistance program counselor. So the person goes for maybe 4 sessions, maybe 6 sessions. They may have a few more if it can be negotiated. And then what happens, those 6 sessions, it can do something, but it can't re-sew or help people put their lives back together, because the very fabric of their existence has been torn apart or ripped to shreds. The worst thing, of course, is if the environment has caused the moral injury. You've been bullied or gaslit or email bullying and so forth. Happens in the workplace as well, that you're sent back into the environment that damaged you. So how on earth can you recover when you're in such an environment? There's a quote by Lorraine Key. She says this: when you propose simplistic solutions to painful situations, employees will feel dismissed, insulted, and their needs invalidated. You'd be better off doing nothing than doing something that worsens the injury. So somebody goes to a provision, it's not even a band-aid, it doesn't even really help. So she's saying that really you might as well have done nothing, because all it does is just compounded the person's feeling of alienation and so forth. I spoke about existential aloneness, and it really it doesn't really fit what I'm talking about, but existential aloneness is sometimes a transitionary period between adulthood or youth to adulthood, this space of not knowing, feeling very, very lonely. But I don't think really we need to kind of discuss existential aloneness. However, moral injury is not recognized as mental illness. However, it can lead to mental illness, depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. And it's that if those experiences are continued, quite often people who've been interviewed or spoken about, they talk about their mental illness cause them to experience this kind of existential loneliness, not feeling connected to anything. And quite often when people do have moral injury, depending on how severe it is, there can be a real feeling of disconnection from the workforce, disconnection from their family, and maybe one of the frightening things is disconnection from themselves. Such has been the trauma and the violation of one's existence. Really important. So what can you do? One of the things that I really want to say to individuals, if you know of anybody over the weeks you've been listening to this and you realize there may be some of your friends, or maybe you've experienced moral injury, what I would say that please give yourself time to grieve and recover. Certainly, if you've been kicked out of your workplace, quite often you've been kicked out unceremoniously. Maybe what they might do in your vulnerable state, and I was talking to a friend of mine during the week, that these NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, were originally put in place so that when somebody left the company, you signed that you wouldn't share any secrets. But what NDAs are used for now, in many instances, are gagging orders. It's nothing to do with confidentiality or the secrecy of of the kind of sensitive information or data, but they're used as gagging orders. And what I've discovered, listen to people, these NDAs are offered to individuals when they're most vulnerable. Sign here, and they're a bit of money. And if I would say to individuals, if you're listening to my voice and you're offered an NDA, if you can step back and ask for time to consider if that is possible. And certainly if you have a union rep, that's very, very helpful. If you have access to ACAS, there's an online organization, government funded, so that work relationships between employer and employee can be harmonious. You can certainly contact them. You can Google it and you can get information from them. They can really help you move forward. So one of the things that what happens is that in our society, there's this real sense of over busyness. It doesn't like us being inactive. It wants us to be doing all the time. And I've got my own ideas around that. I've never been a conspiracy theorist, but I just wonder the busyness in which so many of us are occupied in now, that what's happened while we're so busy, serious things are happening to our society, to our world, that is passing us, and we're not taking the time just to look up for a few minutes because we're so incredibly busy. But Chuck Pett says this: our society tends to favor excessive activity to avoid feeling lonely. That is an unproductive approach because it leaves the pain hidden within. And that's the thing, that there's this busyness that goes on and we don't deal with the stuff that needs to be dealt with. Let me just say a little bit more about that. So this pain that goes on, how then do we deal with it? There's a great quote by Richard Rohr. I'm going to expend a bit more about time that next week. If you do not transform your pain, you will most assuredly transmit it, usually to the closest, those closest to us, our family, neighbors, co-workers, invariably the most vulnerable, our children. He continues by saying, scapegoating, exporting our unresolved hurt is the most common storyline of human history. Right, let me just look at this. So LinkedIn user said, when you're still in it, others watch and manipulate that disconnection from everything happening using their power. It's cruel and impactful, and the hope is you are left vulnerable and then more powerful, so you just walk away simply because and you are left vulnerable and then more powerful, so you just walk away simply because they can. And they just walk away simply because they can. Listen, I can't argue with that at all. I was talking to somebody a few days ago that I'm very clear about power. And I remember talking to an individual, don't need to say his name, very high up in charitable organization, and we had a conversation a few years ago now, and I said to him, power is about serving. And he went absolutely quiet, and I realized at that point I touched a sore nerve. That power is about serving. A lot of the stuff that we see in our leadership about power, it's not. There was a quote during the week on LinkedIn that there are some who nurture the soil and some who grab the fruit. And one individual wrote and said that, yes, quite often there's many who just want to fill their plates. Power has never been, as LinkedIn user has said. So, right, you're in it. Hence, if you're in it, and and this is really difficult. So sometimes what can happen if you're in it and the company wants to get rid of you, you sign an NDA, they give you substantial money. which acts as a buffer. But sometimes they don't do that, and you're left in an environment. And I've always said this, the environment that harmed you, you can't remain in there and be healed, because the toxicity, the individuals, the colleagues, the work structure has injured you, has harmed you, and you can't remain in that place and recover. So whoever you are, thank you. That's a powerful statement. It is cruel and impactful. And one of the things, of course, that moral injury can lead to depression, anxiety, and a whole other host of psychological difficulties. And I was talking to my friend who I've mentioned quite a few times. I have asked their permission, and she said it was okay. And when I told her about a friend of mine who's many years ago now, his mother experienced it, and it bashed her confidence so much she's never ever able to drive again. She's done what she needs to do, but she can't get behind a steering wheel. Such is the power of moral injury, how it can really damage an individual. It really is no joke. So listen, so Richard Rohr has this idea that if pain is not transformed, it's transmitted. Excuse me, let's just take that out there, and it causes lots of damage to people. And yeah, just maybe you've not had a chance to look at the article. I just found out during the week that LinkedIn doesn't send my articles to everybody. So I'm going to be changing from article to newsletters, because newsletters, they send it to all my contacts and so forth. So I didn't know that until I had a conversation with somebody this week. So we're really kind of, the ultimate question is, when we're experiencing moral injury, how do we transform our pain? And that's something I'll be looking at next week and over the next few weeks. But this is one way in which we can do it. In terms of, and Richard Rohr says this, I'm going to finish with this bit for this bit here now. He says, he said, we shouldn't try to get rid of our own pain until we've learned what it has to teach us. Remember, I said, was it last week or the week before, that pain is like a language. And yes, at one level, we know there's pain because we've gone through really brutal experience. But what is it trying to teach us? What is it trying to show us? What is it trying to express to us? What is it trying to offer us insight? And we can do it. Again, I've met some amazing people since looking at this topic. An individual whose name escaped me, and I've not asked their permission in terms of to talk about the story, but it's in the public domain, who has gone through loads of really horrendous experiences. Had therapy, but also been able to work on herself to get to a place where she's able to hold her own and living as best as she can at the moment. So one of the things I wanted to talk about that really helps us in terms of dealing with these difficulties is find or build a community. That's really important. The reason why it's important, because as human beings, we are social beings, and we need to be in community. One of the things I said, I'm just astounded when I look at history and I look at some of the things that happen in various parts of the world. Some cultures, as some of us will know, they have no word for counseling or psychotherapy, but they've been able to work together, or they've been able to get through some real difficulties in either natural disasters and so forth, and they've done it by working together as a community. And this whole thing about community, where you've got people who've got shared experiences, shared ideas, shared values, shared culture, shared history, shared attributes, and there's a strong sense of connection and relatedness. Remember, I spoke about existential aloneness. And one of the things when people have these experiences of moral injury, there's this feeling of disconnection, and also non-relatedness. And as human beings, we really need to feel that we are accepted and that we belong somewhere. That in itself is healing. Sometimes, one of the things is that sometimes if you're in a group of people and you know that you're accepted and you belong, sometimes you don't need to say anything. But just by being in that company of people, it's almost the human connection is therapeutic. and that helps you to deal what you need to deal with. So building a community of people who've gone through similar experiences as yourself is helpful, because there's a shared understanding. We're all in this together. We'll get through together, and somebody's not there scratching their head thinking, what's Delroy going on about? Because Delroy is going through his experience, but you've been through something similar. So there's a place where we're in it together and we're going to get through it together. And I think one of the things I have made comment about is that either you join one, you can either start one. So how do we then transform our pain? As I said, I'm going to spend a bit more time in it next week. But one of the things, our natural inclination with pain is to suppress it, deny it, ignore it, sweep it under the carpet. But it's fatal for us and for other people. One of the things, of course, that when we suppress emotion long enough, it can cause major problems. When we explode, it can be devastating. Freud has this quote. I've shared it some time ago, but maybe some of you may be familiar with it. Fantastic quote. Unexpressed emotion never dies. It is buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. So we dare not suppress the moral injury. So this whole thing about expressing pain is really, really important. So the whole thing also about community is really important. Or community, or this idea of peer support, where individuals have had similar experiences and you get together. And I wanted to just say that the peer support is you get together and you use your experience to help each other and to move forward. That's a great thing about peer support. You don't need to go on to college for 2 or 3 years. The internet and maybe where you live, there's a whole series of courses awash with peer support, and it can be that you're just there to give people a hand during difficult times. The other thing I will say, coming from the world of, I suspect, most religious orientations, is sometimes that we think that what we have to be doing is doing stuff. And I want to implore to everyone who may be listening either live or on catch up, when a friend is in a crisis or they're in a major dilemma or experiencing moral injury, or they've been gaslighted at work, or they've been bullied and it's really affecting them, do not underestimate the power of your presence with them. We feel sometimes we need to be saying stuff and nice stuff and cliches and platitudes and all that type of stuff. And some of it may be helpful. More often it's not. Sometimes somebody wants to know, do you know what, Delroy, I'm going through this. I want to know that I'm not alone. This is horrendous, but I'm not alone. Somebody is walking with me and not saying too much. I'm talking, and they may offer a little bit response, but they're allowing me to talk. The talking is cathartic, allowing these negative emotions some space to breathe so it doesn't contaminate my body. Do not underestimate the power of your presence. You don't have to be a counselor or therapist or somebody who has a high-ranking job, but do not underestimate the power of your presence when you sit with a friend and just being there in their time of need. It's incredibly, incredibly helpful. So these groups don't have to go on forever. They can go on for a few weeks or a few months until people kind of go through the other side of, we were talking about moral injury, but it could be the whole thing about people being bullied, people being overlooked for promotion over many, many weeks and months, even years, and so forth. The impact that it has on us, and how sometimes people can be treated in the workplace. So given the sensitivity of moral injury, and I've said this before, so either find a community, and again, somebody messaged a little while ago thinking that she was the only one experiencing it, but then she found there's a community that other people, and I was talking about this. If you're interested in a temporary community to work through issues surrounding moral injury, DM me, or you can, let's have a look, either DM me on LinkedIn or on my email. I'm more than happy to be with you. if you've not got adequate support where you are, or you want to deal with this away from family and friends, please contact me. Now, of course, this is the way that I earn my living. However, before we think, oh no, he's trying to sell something, let's just have a conversation. And this is something I'm piloting. I've run groups before, but this is something I'm piloting. It's specifically for people with moral injury. And if you want a conversation, please do. And let's see where it goes. I'll never trap you into something. I'll always say, you can always use my service, but there's other services you can use as well. I'll always give you the choice. And if there's any cost, it'll be absolutely minimal. And I mean seriously minimal. I want to finish off with this thought by a psychologist called Jack Saul, who, looking at moral injury, he realized, as he noticed that a lot of the therapy, a lot of the support that was going was individual. And he looked back and he thought, no, this is not right. He said, this is not helpful. And he's written an excellent article called The Hidden Trauma of Moral Injury, From Personal Anguish to Communal Gain. And this is what he says. And I hope I can read it so you can actually understand what he's trying to say. Psychologists dealing with people with moral injury, sending them back out there. And there was just something within him that just didn't sit right. And maybe some of you listening, sometimes you do things and there's just an inner voice. There's something just doesn't sit right. Anyway, this didn't sit right, and he started to write about this. I found myself increasingly uncomfortable with the prevailing view that this ethical distress was located entirely within the individual and should be treated as such. That was the understanding. I began to see that moral healing required not only individual work, the form of most trauma treatment, but also a very peculiar experience of community. As therapists well know, everyone needs a safe space to speak their truth to others, people who can listen and understand with genuine empathy. Being heard in this way can be tremendously reparative, helping to legitimize a person's experience and replace the darkness of self-blame and isolation with the light of self-forgiveness and connectedness. So this psychologist was just watching what was happening, and inwardly, intuitively, something didn't sit right with him. And he was saying that people need to be in community to be healed. In the world of neuroscience, a kind of new emerging field, during lockdown, I was asked to do some work about loss, grief, and bereavement. And very clear in the literature of neuroscience, we deal with loss, grief, and bereavement better in community than as individuals. Within most religious traditions, there is what we call some form of lament, where there's an acknowledgement of the pain and the grief. But interestingly enough, I don't know if I've completed what I was saying a few weeks ago. I was running a workshop at a conference in Cologne, Germany, quite a few years ago now. And we were looking at violence and so forth. And it was interesting. So we would know that religious communities, religious societies have always had a form of rituals. What was really interesting as I did the research, humanists who would say that God doesn't exist and all that type of stuff, and all this religion stuff and spirituality is, I'm not so sure about spirituality, but certainly the God stuff is hocus pocus. But this is what they said. When there's something that's happened so tragic, you can't go on as if nothing has happened. Something has to take place to signify what has happened. So this whole thing about I'm not talking too much about ritual, but certainly community. We go through this together. We recover through moral injury together. And I'm more than happy to certainly I would say to you, don't do it on your own. Either find a therapist, find a community if there's somewhere local. find one online. If you're somebody who's experienced it, but you have some training in peer support, consider doing something online or in person. I think I told, I think it was last week, one of my students many years ago now started a bereavement group when two of her parents, mother and father, died within a very short space of each other. This must be 15 years ago, and as far as I know, the group is still going today. Not the same individuals, but she's continued leading the group. One of the prevailing comments I've heard from individuals who've experienced moral injury is a sense of isolation and loneliness. And some of us will be aware of the stats from the World Health Organization that isolation impacts our bodies to the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And also it impacts the immune system. So loneliness, when we have these experiences, we need to be in community, even if you're not talking, but being with a group of people who get you, who you don't have to educate them. You don't have to explain everything what you have gone through. They get you. That helps the healing process. So, concluding, what can you do? Find a community where you're able to share your story, where you're going to be heard. That's really important. Something you can share your story, not be heard, but sharing your story and being heard. If you can't find one, consider starting one or connecting with other people. Using your experience to strengthen one another and to help each other through. Or DM me or send me an email. Any way that I can support individuals, I'll certainly do that. Up to 10 people. I know that I've got 2 interested already. And certainly I'll keep, at some point I'll stop announcing it. Maybe I'll kind of put a deadline, maybe say by the end of this month. There's time to think about it. But anyway, I wish you well. So we looked at, is recovery possible? It certainly is. We can do it on our own, but it's hard work. But it's a lot easier if we do it in community. And next week we'll be looking at not to get rid of our pain, but our pain is trying to do something. And really we'll be looking at how do we transform this pain? Something indeed horrible has happened to us, according to Marion Keyes. She talks about, and I think what she said is absolutely correct, there's pressure on people to turn every negative into a positive. But she says people must be allowed to say, something strange has happened to me and it has altered my life forever. Moral injury we can recover, but it will alter your life forever. But it doesn't mean that your life is altered negatively. It can be a pathway into something new, something exhilarating. Had you not gone through it, you wouldn't have even considered it. Anyway, wish you well. Enjoy. If you found this helpful, share it with your friends. Let folks know what it's about. I'm found on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. I'll be here next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Please comment, even outside of the broadcast. You've got my contact details. Please contact me if you feel that you want to. So enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen in this week. And also my regulars, many of those who still are still nameless. But you know what? I just thank you very much for being here. Take care. All the best. Enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week. All the best. Bye-bye.